Good evening. Tonight, we're going to be doing dailies with Reaper. And for tonight's question for the chat, how's your opinion on Reaper? I could imagine that there's a very heavy priority of, or I would imagine that there's a majority of people that either at least like the job or maybe even main it, that would watch a stream like this. But it would be interesting to hear anyway. Hey Gunsmokes, how are you doing? The Edge. Right, so we're pretty much just going to be going down the list of roulettes. And as a little reminder, I always say this on streams, if you want to join for the roulettes, you're very welcome to do so. I'm playing on Louis Soir on Chaos, so you simply have to make your way to that data center in that world if you want to join. That of course puts the requirement that you have to be on a European data center to be able to join. Or at least have a character that is eligible to join in a European data center. And then you simply have to either present yourself in game so that I can see you, write me a message in game, which you can easily find my character right here. I can't find myself, shockingly, but that way you would be able to write me a message, or you can just tell me what your character's name is in the stream chat, and then I will just invite you that way. And Santos says, my Reaper is still 80, so I can't say much, but it feels kind of meh. Probably my least favorite melee. That's okay. I know that a lot of players find that the thing is with Reaper that it is either, oh man, this is awesome because you can easily control the job, it doesn't have that many buttons to worry about, or people think this is kind of boring for exactly the same reason, like precisely the same reason. So I would totally understand both ways. Anyway, we will simply be going down the list and starting with Expert Roulette. Personally, I really like the job. It is probably my in Endwalker, the melee that I've played the most. Like out of interest, which is maybe more important for me because I've played all of the jobs a significant amount in connection with making videos, making guides, things like that. But Reaper is one of the jobs that I've played the most. Just, oh, I need to do this dungeon or whatever. For example. And Santos says, I typically like faster jobs like Ninja, Samurai, and Monk. You know, that is a good point. Reaper and Dragoon are the only melee jobs that don't have like a crazy speed buff in its toolkit in some way. Samurai has their Fuka speed buff for 13%, so even at their slowest, their speed is... Oh, there's Gunsmokes hiding over there. In like... Oh, who's this? Metrin Gabu. I don't think I've seen them before. And so even the slowest samurai is at like 215 or 216. Okay, it's Matthew. Welcome. And Ninja is also around, I believe they get 212 or something like that from Futon. 15%, yeah, it would be like 212 at their slowest, I think. And then Monk is at the round 200. Would you like to come to join for some of the roulettes, Matthew? Since you've made your way all the way here. I haven't asked Coco because I know they don't have access to Expert Roulette yet. And Zeke and Santo both say, Zeke says, I love Monk since it's more flexible with its opening. I like the 6-sided star combo into Limit Break 3. Oh, that is a good point. I've never thought about that. You can use 6-sided star and then use Limit Break 3, and then you're only losing out on about half of your GCD. By the way, Matthew, what's your favorite role amongst mage, healer, and ranged physical? Hello, Gelano. And Santo says, Monk is probably my favorite melee, but I'm not very good at it. You know, I had, just the other day, I was doing some content with Monk, and I had a lot of fun with it. But I also made a lot of mistakes in that particular bit. I think one of the things that helps a lot if you want to pick up Monk is to not be too worried about doing everything perfectly. I don't always take the time to say this, but a job like Monk, part of the reason why a rotation like the Mimi Dragon Kick just a moment. The Mimi Dragon Kick rotation, the reason why something like that can come into existence in the first place is because the Monk rotation itself is not very punishing compared to other jobs. Because the job has such a high pace, it's balanced around the fact that you're probably going to make a mistake. So the damage difference between playing perfectly and playing so-so, and even playing kind of bad, is much closer than with other jobs that go a lot slower, like Reaper perhaps. Where making a mistake is going to be more punishing for your average DPS. So as long as you're doing something on every GCD, you don't actually lose that much damage. But it's easy to forget that because most guides you will ever find will focus almost exclusively on how to play the job perfectly. It typically doesn't say anywhere how much damage difference, how big the damage difference is between playing perfectly or making mistakes, because if you start talking about these what-if scenarios of what if you make a mistake and things like that, then it becomes very difficult to explain anything meaningful in a reasonable amount of time. So guides tend to focus on saying, okay, this is the best you can do, and then maybe they'll include what you can do if things go wrong. But it is worth mentioning that Monk, in my experience, and based on what I can see on its potencies and things like that, it does do, you know, like we have the Mimi Dragon Kick rotation that does like 90 or more % of the DPS the proper rotation would make. Even though you're literally skipping nearly half of the rotation. Like the filler rotation, to be specific. And Six says, Monk, just stick to Lunar Solar rotation. It's the safest rotation when in doubt. That is true. That you have like a go-to rotation like that in lunar solar. I think, if I remember correctly, the lunar solar rotation is intended to be the default, and then the 4 others, I believe there's 4, are all like deviations from lunar solar to optimize around this or that specific edge case in the rotation, where you have to deal with something specific. I got my double enshroud situation a little massively off. Don't worry too much about it. We'll be fine. Santos says, I like all the options Monk has, but I'm going for Lunar Solar Opener and Optimal Drift Rotation. Not really good enough to try all that crazy stuff they can do. Yeah, like optimizing the exact timing of when you press Riddle of Wind, so you can sneak in an extra auto attack maybe. And Santos says, also some optimization you see around is basically just placebo, even especially for tanks. You're probably right. The thing is that I think a really good example of that is that the damage difference between optimizing your bursts as a paladin is a really good one. A lot of paladin mains from before the rework are having a hard time accepting the fact that with the rework the damage difference between doing it or not isn't that big. It might be huge depending on specific context, like, oh well, you couldn't completely perform your filler rotation anyway, or a particular team composition results in a particularly massive amount of damage in your burst. It's complicated, these kinds of things. They're complicated. That's ultimately what it boils down to, is that it is complicated. It isn't as simple as you should always do X, but it's way easier to standardize rotations to you should only do this. That is a lot easier to explain. And I say that as someone who makes a lot of job guides. It is a lot easier to explain by just saying there's only one true way to do things. It isn't always the best way to explain things, but it makes it a lot easier. And Coco says, I will play Monk if there's a yellow tracksuit. I suppose you could glamour a tracksuit, I think. The 6 says double solar starts with perfect balance and is a massive difference. I suppose that is true. What I meant is that, like, I mean, double solar technically also starts by doing solar twice, right? Which is also drastically different from lunar solar. But it was more to say that each of them adjust in a particular way, aiming for a specific outcome compared to what the specific fight calls for. I forgot to. I should have made use of my enshroud in this pool. I just didn't for some reason. This was a much better Dublin Shroud opener, I have to say. That went a lot better than on the first boss. Santo says, as long as everything hits under rage buffs. Oops, need to make sure I don't look. As long as everything hits under rate buffs, crit variance will have a bigger difference than niche micro-optimization. That is probably true, yeah. The thing is that if you sit down and calculate what does the most damage, like in terms of exact potency numbers, and comparing rate buffs and things like that, it is true. Like whichever burst or rotation that you can figure out does the most damage will absolutely do the most damage. It's just that on average the damage difference is not going to be so big. And Santos says, especially Dark Knight. You could pull POVs of like 5 top tier Dark Knight players and notice they all probably hit their OGCDs in different order, since it kind of doesn't matter. Yeah, I saw Xeno compare 2 different top P6 pulls. One was Enrage, one was Kill. Other one, he did literally 10% more damage because of better crits. Yeah, that's the thing, because of randomness in critical hits and things like that, is that can actually make that much of a difference quite easily. And the fact that, and this is something that I genuinely think is not the best design decision in Final Fantasy XIV, is that critical hit both increases the chance and the power of your critical hits. Makes it very hard to design a stat that isn't as good as critical hit. The only way to make other stats even remotely relevant is very, very early in some expansions, and I say some expansions because I'm pretty sure Endwalker didn't have this. Like in the first raid tier, it wasn't unusual to see, I believe in Stormblood and Shadowbringers, that the direct hit was better than critical hit, because you couldn't actually reach that critical mass amount of critical hit where it just starts to overtake all the other stats in the game. And you couldn't actually reach that point in the first raid tier, which at least gave direct hit a purpose in that time frame. And Santos says, I think if they had a soft cap where it scales worse, that would be a good idea to solve it. However, I think the better solution would be to just either make it so that the critical hit just has a higher base power than it does now, and then make the critical hit stat just be a chance increase. Just the chance. Or they could even make it so that you have to, like, they could separate it into 2 stats. Uh-oh. So that you, as a player, would actually have to go for both. I believe Guild Wars 2 has this. That you actually have to choose between getting more critical hit damage or chance. You can't have both in the same attribute or stat. Because that would suddenly mean that while critical hit, chance and damage in conjunction with each other would be the best stat to stack, then you would also need to have, you know, the damage bonus. You need to have both for it to actually be good. I also want to, just to be clear here, to say that direct hit, as Santo says, well, direct hit isn't much better. If my history on Final Fantasy XIV is correct, then direct hit is a band-aid solution to the fact that they deleted hit chance as a stat in the game. Used to be the case that you had to also gear hit chance, so you didn't miss your attacks randomly. But yeah, exactly, Santo. Crit scales exponentially, making it just the best. And Matthew says, Determination Directed was better for the first 4 weeks of Endwalker. Wasn't that just because you didn't have the upgraded gear yet? As far as I remember, and now I will admit that it is a long time ago, so I might remember this completely wrong. But if I remember correctly, direct hit and determination were superior to critical hit for the entirety of the first raid tier in Shadowbringers and Shadowbringers and Stormblood. I'm pretty sure. It wasn't just for the first few weeks. I'm pretty sure it was the whole the whole raid tier, which is still not great. Still not great. But it's better than now, where it's just some of the first raid tier and then it's over. Hey! And Sansa says, crit is 0.1 every 9.5 points. After a certain threshold, it could be 0.08 every 9.5 points, and then 0.05. Yeah, it could be that they made it so that it naturally, tapers off, so that it compensates for double dipping. I think that might actually be a really good solution, Santo. Because the big problem with the key issue with critical hit as a stat in Final Fantasy XIV is the part, as you said, that it scales exponentially because it double dips. Every point of critical hit you get makes the next point better. Thank you for joining, Matthew. Because every point you get makes the next point better, that makes it impossible for determination and direct hit to compare, because they both scale linearly, which actually means, relatively speaking, that they become worse. Like, if you had 5% more damage from determination, then gaining 1% more determination is not going to equate to you doing 1% more damage, because you're already doing 105%, right? You're going from 105 to 106, so in some ways you could actually say that because determination directed scales linearly, they actually drop off in value as you get more of it, while the fact that critical hit scales exponentially, it means that it will eventually catch up to and then surpass this drop-off effect, so that it becomes better to stack critical hit than anything else. Like, I remember in Stormblood, because the stats on your Eureka relic was random, you could get one that had only critical hit on it, which was best in slot. And Nimyai says, glad I made it. Welcome to the stream, Nimyai. And Dot Orion says, your melee comparison video convinced me to try Reaper for a chill melee DPS experience. That's good to hear. I hope that it lived up to the expectation, because I think I've done a lot on this channel to sell Reaper on that specific aspect, given that I have multiple videos saying that Reaper is exactly that. The chill DPS. Santos says, the difference between critical directed double down or Hyushuranryu and non-crit or directed one is wild. Oh yeah, what was it? Thursday, when I released an opener short on Red Mage, the funny thing that I ran into was that on the Discord community server, the conversation focused more heavily on the fact that the short opens with me doing, I believe it was 55,000 damage with resolution, which doesn't normally happen. Because it just happened to be a critical directed. And that's how it goes. If you have a lot of crit, and let's be real guys, we probably all do have a lot of critical hits, then a critical directed is like double damage. When I've been so sometimes I like to go to the Stone Sky Sea and just practice, like see if I can do a better time. If I've already perfected the rotation and can't really add anything to it, I can't do any more with it, then the only thing that can change it is how many critical hits I get, how many critical direct hits I get, how many direct hits I get, and which of the attacks are the critical direct hits. Like, the difference between getting a bunch of the Thunder critical direct hits as a Red Mage and getting every single resolution to be a critical direct hit is... it's massive. It's unreasonably big. Which makes sense. It makes sense. It's just a shame that the best stats for stacking your damage in Final Fantasy XIV is random. And Santos says, at the very least, I hope next year has some tank gear with like crit skill speed or determination skill speed. All the skill speed pieces are tenacity skill speed, making high speeds for tanks. Oh yeah, it's not really worth it if there's tenacity on it. And Dr. Ryan says, I'll let you know once I reach max level, I guess. It's pretty chill at level 70. Well, if you've just picked up Reaper, you'll be happy to know that tomorrow and Thursday I'm releasing some Reaper guides. One for level 70, if there's something you feel like you may have missed or you want to be sure you got it right. And one that goes over everything gradually up to level 90, and then a large amount of the video is actually going over the opener, general rotation, and the... oh, there's Kasadi as well. Hello. You're also welcome to join for roulettes if you want to. You just have to make it known. Then I will invite you. Yeah, I ran into an interesting situation. You're here as a Dragoon. Do you want to join, Kasadi? I'm going to need a quick answer. I'm number 1 in the queue. You can be here as a Dragoon. I'm the one who's the Reaper only, as you know. You'll join for next one. Oh, okay. And Junebox, well, welcome to the stream, says, hope the reaping goes well. Well, I hope so too. We opened with some interesting results on the first boss, certainly. I just have to get warmed up, you know. And Santos says, melding for at least for tanks basically boils down to, can you melt crit in the piece? If yes, then do so. If not, melt... Exactly. Exactly, Sancho, and I'll have you know, as someone who has poured over stat priorities for every job, that the only jobs that don't go, can you fit crit in it? Then put crit in it. Is like Black Mage and Summoner if you're doing a speed build, but you're typically only doing a speed build with Summoner for extremely specific encounters, like specific encounters where speed happens to be beneficial for some reason, or it's because you're actually a Black Mage main and you just are on your off day playing some Summoner. So to not mess up your build, your spell speed build for Black Mage, you just stick with the same build for your Summoner. And because of the amount of spell speed you get on your spell speed Black Mage builds, because you're basically prioritizing spell speed in place of crit, you actually don't get enough critical hit to reach that breaking point where critical hit becomes god tier. So these Black Mages and Summoners tend to stack direct hit and determination instead, because crit doesn't reach the point where it's even worth it. Because, and this is the key thing, this is the key problem. This is the key problem with critical hit now, is that critical hit is balanced on the fact that it scales worse than direct hit and determination if you don't have very much of it. But it's very, very easy in Endwalker to get a lot of it. So you're never really in that situation. So that's sort of why the system breaks. Is because the part of the game where crit is supposed to be bad is so strict and specific that it is actually difficult to even be, and you have to go out of your way to have little critical hit. And Santo, I actually have 2 different mage gear sets, because I have one for Summoner and Red Mage and one for Black Mage. All other roles I just use one set, because that's good enough. I don't need it to be more complicated than that. But that does mean that I have an unreasonably high amount of spell speed on my Black Mage, but my item level is lower than on certain other roles. Sansa says, I am intrigued by Speed Samurai, but I don't think it's very compatible with Monk. Yeah, probably not. I think Monk is really picky with how much it wants of specific stats, right? I'm pretty sure it is like that. The advantage in Speed Samurai, I believe, is that because you value each individual GCD a little less, downtime, well, losing, well, actually, wait, no, that's wrong. The slow samurai is hurt a lot more. I messed up my Soul Reaver stack there, sorry about that. Awkward. The slow samurai is hurt a lot more quickly by even the slightest delay in their bursts, because they benefit from making the most of their cooldowns. You know, like Senye and Oginamikiri. While fast samurai is hurt more by downtime in general, because the main gimmick, the main benefit of Speed Samurai is that you get more regular GCDs. I wonder how much you would be able to do, because I'm pretty sure that you can't reach a point in Speed with Samurai where you would be able to fit a full extra Midare Setsugeka before a burst. I'm pretty sure it caps out at like 4 or 5 fillers at most. Oh, get that Death's Design up. I want that free resources. And Sancho says Monk is around 194. Yeah, that's correct. It's like, it's very specific. I mean, what exactly is it that is the reason why a monk wouldn't want even more speed? Could a speed monk work? Why wouldn't it work? Is it because the opportunity cost of choosing to use of investing all that skill speed instead of crit is too much? So you lose out on too much damage on your masterful blitzes? Is that it? That is my best guess for why that would be. I think we don't have to do the double. The early Enshroud compensated for that. So if you're not super well versed in the game plan of a Reaper, the reason why you see me quite regularly go into the Enshroud and then use Shadow of Death twice, of all things, is because you may know that the optimal way for a Reaper to maximize their damage in a 2-minute burst is to get 2 Enshrouds back to back. That seems reasonable and logical. To do that, you need to actually waste 5 seconds in your existing Enshroud, because it takes around 9 seconds, give or take, around 9 seconds, to spend an Enshroud from start to finish. But the cooldown on Enshroud is 15 seconds. Don't know why I'm moving like that. No reason to do that. So the best way to go about that is to simply spend some GZDs using Shadow of Death, because it's one of the only GZDs you have access to while you are in Enshroud. So you have to enter Enshroud and just hang out for a few GZDs for it all to work out. And it doesn't sound very intuitive, I'm sure. But that is how it's done. That is how you do the double Enshroud, is that you enter Enshroud and then you spend 2 GCDs, at least 2 GCDs on something else. And the way that we go about it is that we generally do alternating Reaps and Shadow of Death. Mainly because we don't have the time to spend the entire Enshroud anyway, if we also want to be able to reach around and cover both of our communios in the Arcane Circle or other raid buffs. But that I think that is one of the weirder parts of the job, is that you have this extremely unintuitive Enshroud window for your burst. That is also for those interested, that is also something that takes up a huge part of the max level portion of the Reaper guide coming out on Thursday. Simply because it takes a while to explain how it's done, why it's done, things like that. I've also been very bad at actually getting my my harvest moons spent throughout trash packs in both of the dungeons we've done so far. That is not intentional. I'm supposed to have spent harvest moon when a pull is over consistently. It is so much damage that I'm losing out on because I'm being a dum-dum. Perfect. Let's continue, boss. Right in the melee range. There we go. A nice 2-minute burst. Kasadi says, how many times do I have to tell this boss, Vapen is not yet here? That's the thing over there. What? Thank you, Iman Boom. Hope you have a nice day or evening or whatever you have wherever you are. Thank you so much. May Festival. Is that related to something with this boss? I don't think I follow. Oh right, we had Limit Break. That is a classic Kai thing. Oh yeah, limit break. Let me see, did I miss anything in the chat? I don't think I did. Oh. So, do the bunnies want to join for 50, 60, 70, 80 roulette? the either playing dead or sleeping bunnies. Do you want to join, Kasari? Yes, yes. Yes, yes. Zanamatsu. 5, 6, 7, 8 roulette. Yes, yes. Swedish Wikipedia. Oh, is it as me googling it? It says that it's something in Finland. Is that it? Oh boy. Now it's time to see level 50 Reaper. This is our toolkit. These 4 lines. That's it. That's everything we have. This is a situation where there's a heavy use of long-colored paper sheets. Oh, okay. Okay, now I get it. Because the boss was spewing colored streamers everywhere. I get it. Oh man. We get to use Bloodstock every now and then, and that's it. We have 1 OGCD. That's actually pretty good. Surprisingly powerful. If you think Reaper feels a bit meh at level 70, don't even get me started on level 50. Exactly, Junebug. You have your 1, 2, 3 combos. You also have your AoE combo, but and you can also apply your Death's Design in both ways. So you have your basics, like you have the absolute bare bones. That's it. But then you just barely have your soul gauge. It hits like a truck. No doubt about that. It hits incredibly hard. It's just that it doesn't really do anything. You also have a defensive. It is funny with these jobs that start at really high level to play them in low level content. They're simultaneously really bare bones compared to other jobs that start earlier, but they're also somehow also weirdly powerful at the same time. Oh, that's nice. We get the free soul gauge for every body part when the boss drops to the floor. Oh. Oh, sorry about that. Oh no. I didn't see. Well... that is awkward. Are you okay over there? Antique solarids. But it is, speaking of skill speed, it is funny. Not too surprising, perhaps, given that I do play Reaper quite a lot. I have gone into the lengths of going into advanced Reaper guides, and well, of course, make sure that I know what's good when I'm making a guide, right? What do other people say? But there was like a whole graph where someone had spelled out exactly, like over the course of like a boss fight, where they had assumed things like downtime and things like that. Like they had assumed an average boss encounter. They had figured out exactly how much skill speed is good. So when you hear Reapers like talk at length about exactly how much skill speed you want and don't want in relation to your opener and your rotation, it's because someone figured out exactly where the breakpoint is. Like exactly how much is too much and how much is not enough. And it is funny that this happens. I feel like with all of the jobs that the jobs that have the weirdest fixation on stats, like Reaper actually has with skill speed, are the jobs that don't have very much room to optimize. Summoners would also be very interested in that. It's just that there isn't even much to say about that either. That's because if your rotation is really, really, really simple, then the only way you can optimize it further is by making the most of what you have. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you can see jobs that don't actually get that much value out of optimizing their rotation. So they optimize every single little decimal point of extra DPS they can get, like Monk. Non-consensual grabbing. It went out of hand. Look at these jokesters. Look at these memers over here in the chat. Oh boy. That is a ridiculous walk cycle. What a fight. It is an interesting fight. The game did not handle my jokes well. Did the game break on you? The sound is gone. Oh. I don't run into this bug a lot. I don't know how the sound is gone exactly, Pasari, but the way I've typically seen it is that music is still playing. That's how I experience it. The music is still playing, and some attacks will still have sound. Like specific actions work completely fine. And this persists typically until you restart the game, if it is that way, if it is like that for you. The first time I experienced it was in like the first week or two of Endwalker. And in my attempt to fix it, I closed the game. Now I was like playing at a time, was like, oh, well, I'm sure the queues aren't that big yet. I can just restart the game and it'll be fine, right? Yeah, so I didn't get into the game again for the rest of the evening. Junebug says, is the Endwalker audio bug still around? I got it so bad at the start of the expansion. Yeah, exactly. I discovered that when I started playing PvP a lot in the season 1 of Crystalline Conflict, that it happens when there's a significant amount of noise, like when there's too many things happening at once. It's as if like the sound of the game gets overloaded. That doesn't make any sense, but bear with me. Oh, he can get stunned. Excellent. I never trust earth elementals to get stunned. But when the sound gets overloaded like that... oh, right. Then it just breaks, and it has happened a lot for me in PvP specifically. The way that I resolved it typically is that I discovered that if the master volume was below 5%, it sounds absurd, but if it was really, really low, the master volume, so that the game sound never really broke over a certain threshold, it didn't happen anymore. Like, it just completely vanished. Now, you might have noticed that my master volume is over 5%. That was necessary for the stream to be able to hear voice lines when we're playing Small Kai on Saturdays. And I haven't had major issues, so I haven't had the need to fix it or adjust it. Lamau, imagine having positionals, am I right? It's been a thing since Boja. Here come the mummies. I'll never get used to the fact that the ninja raid buff is just a vulnerability debuff and not the trick attack icon. We're not getting a limit break 2 anyway. Nice. Materia. But it is very funny, as I was saying before, that the jobs that start at higher levels get this really, really strange simple rotation with hardly anything in it at low level, but it hits insanely hard. Like, if you've ever done really low level, if you've ever done really low level dungeons as a samurai, that is a pretty good example. Like, we'll just wait for Kasadi to relog. If you're like in, I don't know, 1,000 Maws of Totorak, you're level 27. Actually, that's a bad example because you have AoE by then. Halatali, then you're level 23. You have 2 step 2 combos. You don't have any AoE. You literally have Hakase Jinpu Shifu. You also have NP, but you have no reason to use it. You have no reason to use NP at all. You don't have any traits. You have all your roll actions, but your entire rotation in Halatali is Hakase Jinpu, Hakase Shifu, or the opposite. You just alternate, and somehow, some way, Samurai hits like a freight train on one target. That is the key problem here, is that in Halatali, I'm pretty sure the strongest DPS is like Dancer. Because by that level, they have Windmill, a 1-2 combo, and Standard Step. That is the... They actually have a 1-2-3 combo sometimes, if they're lucky. But they have an AoE filler, a decent combo, and Standard Step. And Standard Step hits so hard. And has an AoE component. There's no competition. In fact, all of the ranged physical jobs are incredibly overpowered in the first few levels where melee don't have any AoE yet. And Samurai and Reaper, and in some capacity Monk, because they do get the Armor of the Destroyer a bit early. They also get Rockbreaker. But Samurai and Reaper are the weird ones because they will have their AoE by 1,000 Maws of Totorak. They will have their step 1. Monk will too, but it just... I don't know. It doesn't feel as strong. But I guess it's just me. I don't see many monks in low level spam Armor of the Destroyer. Alright, Kosadi is back. And Coco says Nin doesn't have AoE in both of those. Correct. And melee generally doesn't really get their AoE in order until around level 40s or something, is the expectation, but that's mostly Ninja and Dragoon that makes that. It's just awkward. There's nothing wrong with that. Next roulette we're doing is leveling. Are you both ready for that? Kasadi, do you have a healer or tank you want to play in a leveling roulette? Or maybe something? Maybe we can make a little switcheroo if you both want something that can level? You are ready, okay. If we get that one dungeon. Well... So which one is it? Is it going to be... No, we didn't get that one. We got the double Sunken Temple of Khan. Coco has been haunted by Aurum Vale recently. Also, do Ninja gets their AoE at level 38, don't they? Alright, some hype. Reaper level 37 action. We have a 1-2-3 combo. A single step of the AoE combo. And we can apply Death's Design. Oh man, how we can apply Death's Design, let me tell you. That is something we're really good at. Low-level Reaper content. Oh yeah, you have Katon. That's true. It's better than nothing. I suppose there's some optimization to be made in that regard. In that if you can stockpile ninjutsus, you can do pretty massive AoE. You can probably beat my AoE pretty handily if you maximize your ninjutsu casts on AoE. You can just do Katon twice at this as soon as the enemies are stacked, and then right after the fight you use hide to recover your ninjutsus. And you could do pretty hard. Like, I think, isn't Katon like 300? I remember that it is crazy strong. Junepug says Reaper 37 is the real gameplay. Yeah. 350. You do like 3 times the damage of one of my AoE attacks in a single GCD. Ish. I'll kill the ads. Blowing button. Fun fact, I believe you can stun this boss. And you can, if you time it right, you can actually cancel the Mortal Ray thing. Now I'm announcing that you can and then not doing it because melee DPS stuns are weak and tank stuns are strong. So I would rather lose out on the possibility of stunning the boss on the off chance that maybe, just maybe, the tank would use theirs. Oh boy. A little more. And these enemies are optional. Fun fact. We don't have to fight them. They will actually reset if we run far enough. It's really weird. Our Realm Reborn content is just weird. And dungeons like Sunken Temple of Khan that aren't part of the main story in a significant way will only become even more weird when put up next to the dungeons that are part of the main quest that gets a fresh up, a little update to make them better accommodate NPCs. Junebug says, Ifrit can be stunned. That's insane. There's also this boss where it just randomly rushes up to the healer and smacks them. Gilano says, I can't believe new players will never experience the old Totorak or Copperbell mines. Yeah, that's true. I think it was interesting that especially 1000 Miles of Totorak has had all of the paths. And the untelegraphed second boss in Aurum Vale, you know, Gilano, it's even dumber than that, because if it wasn't for the fact that Aurum Vale is optional, that boss would pretty much be the proper introduction to mobs like it that don't have telegraphs. It's like the only one of those kinds of enemies that has telegraphs. Most of them, if not all of them, have invisible telegraphed attacks nowadays. I am not sure why they made this change. Junebug says, I wish they kept them in the dungeon list, the old version, namely. Even if they would never pop in roulettes, just for preservation. That's true, they could have just kept them as 1000 Moss of Totorak, parentheses, old. And you unlock the old version when you have finished the new version, for example. Or even when you see the credits after Ultima Weapon, so that it doesn't confuse new players into thinking they have to do it. I agree, that I think that they should have done that, but I do understand why they didn't bother, because I'm sure that a lot of players would say, yeah, please preserve it if they asked, but I think an even larger amount of players will simply be like, well, I'm not going to play it. It's cool that they kept it, but I'm genuinely not going to play it. A legacy tab. They could do that too, yeah. It is a good idea. I just wonder how many players would actually bother to use it. Oh man. I did this dungeon many times back in the day, or at least a long time ago, where players weren't aware that, one, you didn't have to fight the head, like the two heads in the middle part, and two, where players didn't care whether you didn't have to put anything on the scales or not. People would go out of their way to grab the things that opened the secret extra corridor just because they could. You don't really see that anymore. Mainly because the things that drop in the offside corridor aren't particularly valuable, and because it's very easy to solo this dungeon unsynced. If you wanted something that dropped from there specifically, you could just go and get it. Okay, then I won't try to deal with it. We're too powerful. We can't actually deal with the ad mechanic because the ad is too fragile and dies before we can move it into position. Uh-oh. Huh. Interesting. Oh, a song I don't have. the interesting thing I noticed is that you may know that using your limit break puts you in like an animation lock where you can't move for a little bit. If you paid extremely close attention, you would have seen that I actually took a step forward in like the slide casting range of the final bit of the limit break cast time, you know, the last half second. I actually took a step forward and then I got animation locked. So apparently the animation lock that forces you to stand still for the limit break happens when the cast is finished, but there's actually nothing preventing you from like slide casting the cast itself. I didn't know that. I just noticed it just now. We're doing trials next. Actually, which things are on the trial list? Enough that Coco can still go. That's good. They could make a legacy tab. I think the argument for whether it would matter boils down to a similar one to, you know, when people requested like vanilla servers for World of Warcraft, and Blizzard believed that no one actually were interested, and then when they made them, not only were people interested, people were so interested that they had to like double or triple the amount of servers in a couple of days because there was such an overwhelming influx of players that suddenly wanted to play because vanilla World of Warcraft was on the table. Now, instead of a game you haven't been able to play in like 15 years, you're given being able to keep a dungeon or a trial with Cape Westwind that you can then go and do if you want to, I guess. I don't think people would do it, is what I'm saying. If they're going to make legacy stuff, I think it would be way better if they went, you know, whole hog and went, okay, we're making like a Realm Reborn, like 2.0 servers or something like that. You know, a little bit like how World of Warcraft has done it. But then the question becomes, who would do that? I don't remember if we're supposed to run closer to each other or further away. Did we... Hello. Okay. Figured out the mechanics, guys. It only took us like 30 seconds. And I'm a chicken now. Cape Westwind was good. I will say that the new version of Cape Westwind, where it's just a trial, is really good. Where it's just a solo duty, I mean, is really good. Ow. Wow! I think we messed it up. I think we might have overlooked something, guys. I don't think it's supposed to do that. Junebug says, I'd love to try a 2.0 server, but I know the devs are very against it right now. UGP looks like he's in physical pain anytime someone asks him about it. Well, yeah, I want to point out that what people are requesting that makes UGP go into physical pain is actually 1.0 servers, I'm pretty sure. I believe his response to that was Nightmare. And just Nightmare period, the end. There's a lot of interesting things that they actually did in 1.0. I discovered recently that in 1.0, you could actually equip gear that wasn't for your role or job. Like a Reaper would be, well, a Gladiator, for example, or a Paladin. Let me just try and see what happens if I run into it. That didn't do anything. Well, in that case... like a Gladiator would be able to wear a Black Mage robe if they wanted to. You could do that. Okay, I just got the chicken buff, debuff refreshed on me. I didn't want to attack anyway, it's alright. Which is a funny concept because players these days request that they want all equipment to be wearable in all content, or well, for all jobs. All gear equipable by all jobs, specifically. That hurts a lot more if you're not a chicken, but they explode if you don't take them. But what happened? What would happen is that when you were wearing gear that wasn't associated with your job or role, it would have worse stats. So imagine, yes, you can, as a Black Mage, choose to wear a tank chest piece if you want to, but you only get 75% of the stats from it, and more importantly, the stats on it will not be very helpful for you. So what the developers would ultimately see is that all of the players would never do that. They just wouldn't do that. Because it's obviously a damage loss to do that, even back then. So why give you the option? You're not going to use it. Yeah, that's true, Giuliano. In A Realm Reborn, white and Black Mages have certain shields they can wear. But I wonder why they sort of phased that. I'm guessing the reason why they phased it out was because giving white and Black Mages multiple options for gear put a huge amount of expectation on gear drops to give you, different options. If your job has the ability to wear a one-hander and a shield, or just a two-hander, then there has to be a reason to choose one or the other. And given that having a shield is better defensively, then the two-hander has to be better offensively. Which means, once again, as I was just saying, no one would use the wand and shield if the two-hander would give you more damage output. The only reason why it's even a thing in Boja is because the damage loss from using the shield is extremely small. I think it's like 0.1%, but having the shield is more than like 1% damage reduction on average. Did they buff Gilgamesh? I feel like he's really, really tanky. They buffed Greg, I think. Or maybe our group isn't that strong. That is also an option. Or maybe I remember badly. And Dot Orion says, you're telling me there was no gladiators in fabulous dresses at all? There probably were. I'm sure back in 1.0 there was, gear pieces intended for, just wearing to look fabulous. But one thing was that, and a different one was being able to wear all gear. Thank you. It wasn't a Leviathan boss in 1.0. Raven asks, if it were a 1.0 or 2.0 server, wouldn't it just erase the newer jobs? No. So what we mean by a 1.0 or 2.0 server is that the game would be as it was back then. For example, in 2.0, in fact, from A Realm Reborn to Stormblood, I'm going to take a really specific thing because it's something that I believe all the Savage Raiders will be familiar with and all players that have ever tried to optimize. You know this party bonus, right? Where it says you get 1% bonus for each role represented. It didn't work like that until Shadowbringers. In A Realm Reborn and Heavensward and Stormblood, having a tank in your party increased your party's vitality by 3%. Having a healer increased your mind by 3%. Having a strength DPS increased your strength by 3%. And having a bard or machinist by Heavensward or ninja, I think, would increase your dex by 3%. And having a mage would increase your int by 3%. Now, in a Realm Reborn and Heavensward, there was a little bit more complexity to it because healers actually used intelligence for damage. So having a mage would make your healers able to do more damage. And having a melee DPS made your healers, Scholar in particular, your tanks, and actually your summoners do more damage with their auto attacks and physical attacks because they all scale with strength. But only bards and ninjas and machinists actually use dex for anything. So imagine that. Your incentive back in A Realm Reborn to Stormblood to bring a bard was not the party bonus. It was actually because of the bard's utility itself. Because it didn't actually provide any party bonus that anyone else cared about. That is just one example that would be completely different if we were playing in 2.0. Another thing is that we would have the TP bar, and in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, the sprint button cost all of your TP to use, so I'm sure we would love that one back. Gilano says there wasn't any Leviathan boss in 1.0, but we did see him in a cutscene though. You know, one of the saddest things about TP and enmity management, these two key concepts, I just want to talk about this shortly before we jump into, I think, Alliance Raid Roulette, is that by Stormblood, you could manage, almost completely alleviate in a lot of situations, any issues with TP and enmity with teamwork. What I mean by that is that in Stormblood, all jobs that were DPS or healer had some sort of enmity management button that would enable you to do less enmity, so that the tank didn't have to worry as much. And so the tank could even go to the damage stance, which did less enmity. And all jobs that used the TP bar had some way to recover it. And all melee DPS specifically had this specific role action called Goad. With a D, not goat, not goat. You didn't throw goat at people. You didn't ram anyone. You goaded them. I believe it was a ninja action in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward. And what it did was it increased the TP regeneration of someone other than yourself. But it was really strong. Now, goaded with the sauce. Now, you might think, wow, that's incredible. Surely everyone would be using that a lot, right? They would just throw it around. You have two melee DPS, they throw goad on each other. Or if you have just a tank and a melee, the melee would throw goad on the tank. And then we have a grand old time and do a lot of AoE damage, right? No, actually. You typically never saw, outside of like coordinated Savage Raid teams, you rarely saw any DPS use their enmity management tools unless that enmity management tool came with some other benefit. For example, lucid dreaming, you know, the one that makes you recover a huge amount of MP, just cut all the enmity you already had in half, I believe. Something like that. Tactician, the TP recovery song Gelano mentioned. Yeah, the Machinist defensive cooldown was actually just TP regen in Stormblood. That one also reduced your enmity by a crazy amount. But all of the melee DPS, what they had was diversion, which was just you do less enmity for 15 seconds. It didn't do anything else. So if you didn't understand what enmity was, and let's say if you were a melee DPS main, never had to understand what enmity was, what you read was, this button does nothing. So you didn't click it. In fact, you have to remember you had to choose it, because in Stormblood you only had 5 role action slots. So you go here and go, do I want diversion which does nothing for 15 seconds, or do I want True North? I think I'll take True North. So people didn't use diversion. Goat gave someone else TP, but why should you give someone else TP? You want to do more damage. You don't want to make other person do more damage. You want to be the one doing damage, so why would you choose Goat when you could choose a role action that helped yourself? What I'm getting at with this is that both TP and enmity evolved into avenues for players to help each other in Stormblood. Like, they went from some really complicated issue for each individual player that sometimes you had something you could do with it, to in Stormblood just being an avenue for people to teamwork a little bit. And then they didn't. And then they removed both as an issue entirely. So I wonder if it would go any better if we had, if we went back in time to a Realm Reborn. Anyway, Alliance Raid Roulette time. Are you ready? Any bets on which one we get? We have the Crystal Tower as our 3 options. It is funny that you can like store some of the old actions. I think I might have some of them. Let me just check something. Yeah, this is a really fun fact because like, see, I've kept some of the buttons for Gladiator. I have Flash. Some of you remember Flash? But this is also why I know that they actually that when they reintroduced Bulwark, they literally reintroduced Bulwark because the button just, you know, turned on again. It is funny that you're allowed to keep buttons like that. I think it's a cute detail with the game that they don't just delete the actions off your bars. They just turn them off and go, you can't use it anymore. Yeah, Realm Reborn and Heavensward, what I've read about it, because I didn't play until Stormblood myself, were a weird game compared to what it is now. And Coco says, as long as you don't get Dunscathed. I don't know, I don't mind Dunscathed. Junebox says, I wonder if they'll make any big changes to the combat systems for 7.0. Yeah. An interesting thing we run into now in Final Fantasy XIV, and we have actually been there for a while, is that most jobs don't really have space for any more. Like, you'll notice that the majority of jobs, like that, let's take something like Samurai, just as an example. From level 70 to 80, they learn, or level 71 to 80, they learn 3 new actions. That's pretty good. From level 80 to 90, they learn 2 new actions. And then they upgrade an existing one as the 3rd one. You take Ninja. You learn 1 new action. Technically 2, it's just that it's 2 flavors of the same button. Everything else is built into something else, because there isn't space for anything. You could even take something like Paladin. From level 80 to 90, you learn no new buttons, because there isn't space for anything. Dark Knight, you learn... Actually, they learn 2 things. They had some space, as you can see. But from level 70 to 80, they learned also 2 things. Actually, Dark Knight is a really bad example, I see. Anyway, my point is that we have actually reached like a breaking point where a lot of jobs don't have space for any more. There isn't any more slots for things. And even if there were, unless it's an OGCD, where is it going to go in the rotation? I think Reaper is among the jobs that could feasibly fit more in it, but that's mainly because their 1-2-3 combo was never really that important to begin with. Like, as far as Reapers are concerned, if you replace their 1-2-3 combo with just Waxing Slice, you know, just the middle point of the rotation, just Waxing Slice, and then gave them 2 more interesting buttons, I think most Reapers wouldn't even care. While most other jobs with combos, the combo has some meaning. It generates a resource in a significant amount that you don't get from something else. Things like that. That is a really big lance. Wow. Just add more hotbars. I think the developers, based on how they, when they split Fleeting and forked Raiju for Ninja into 2 buttons, they simultaneously moved Phantom Kamaitachi into the Bunshin button, so that they kept the amount of buttons the same. Is one of the most telling signs from the developers that they don't think that any more than 3 bars is fair. You have to remember, if you're playing on keyboard, it might not be that difficult to reach 3 whole bars. But imagine if you played on controller. Exactly, Raven. You can add more hotbars, but not more fingers. I would start to have a massive issue with key binding everything if we needed 4 bars to fit everything. That's why when I'm playing a job that requires more than what space I have, I will sacrifice my teleport keybind before I'll try. Ow! I'm dead. Wow! Wait, the room's closed. Shouldn't release. Just use your toes. But yeah, we basically come to the point where there isn't really space for more buttons for a lot of jobs. And even those that do have space for a little more, there isn't really space for anything in the rotation. I remember even back in Stormblood, monks talked about the fact that they didn't really need anything. Like, the only thing they maybe were talking about back then was, oh well, we could do with like a step 2 AoE combo, I guess. Armor the Destroyer is kinda bad. Back in Stormblood even, Arm of the Destroyer was an AoE interrupt, so it didn't do very much damage. So, when Shadowbringers came around, they buffed Arm the Destroyer and gave them a step 2 AoE combo. Now the monks just went, well, it would be nice if we had a way to like keep Greased Lightning up more reliably. Just delete Greased Lightning. Just delete it as a buff you had to stack. Problem solved, right? Gasadi says, I play on a controller, and yeah, I will struggle if I have skills in more than 2 hotbars. Yeah, exactly. Most jobs... why is it still bound to me? That was really strange. Most jobs don't need anything by now. Paladin was also a really good example of a job where they looked at their rotation and went, there isn't really space for anything. In Stormblood, they looked at the rotation and went, we don't really need anything. So in Shadowbringers, they just added Confiteor as a stronger option to use to finish your requisite windows. You would, before that, you would just use Holy Spirit 5 times. 5 times, yes. Uh-oh, there's 1 hourglass left. Ow. And then they also made it so that during your requisite window, your spells were instant. That was like the only things that paladins were like, oh, we could use that. And then they added Atonement, which now allowed you to do something other than do like an extra Royal Authority combo. Like it was just, you're using Royal Authority combo twice in a row. That was the only thing, the only space that was left in the Paladin rotation that wasn't being used. And then when Endwalker came, they just upgraded some things and then concluded there was no space left, and then reworked the job entirely because Goring Blade's dot and the sustained DPS style of Paladin didn't mesh very well with the bursty nature they had employed as the general game plan of raiding. Junebox says, I ran this raid like 30 times and I still have no idea what the hourglasses do. I just killed them. Let me explain to you what the hourglasses do. You see the gray you saw the gray quarters that was like teleporting around, like just flipping around, making that selection sound from old school Final Fantasy games. If you don't kill the hourglasses, then this quarter will just suddenly stop and immediately kill everything on that quarter. They just kill like everything on a quarter of the arena. But if you kill the hourglasses, then the quarter will stop for a few seconds, so you can run out of it while it's, you know, giving the warning sign, and then it will kill everyone that is still on it. That is what the hourglasses do. I hope that makes sense, Junebug. Hey, Brown Eyes. It's going well. We're pretty far through the roulettes, actually. How are you doing? What is a funny mechanic with those hourglasses is that you're not actually preventing a mechanic from happening, you're just making it occur in a less lethal way. Flatlining contradiction, that's pretty funny. It says, people actually know the mechanics to this raid? I thought everyone just winged it every time. Well, when you've done it 100 times, you might start to go, well, actually, why is it we do these things that we do? But you're right that because most players just wing it, the strategy originally was, you know, for example, for Cerberus, the strategy originally was A for ads, B for belly, and C for chains, which meant that the C also had the responsibility of dealing with the boss and tanking the boss and stuff like that. But because the majority of the raid doesn't actually know, 1, which ads are relevant to kill, and 2, how to enter the belly, and 3, what chains even mean, it has changed to everyone that knows how to go in belly, go in belly. And that's the only strategy. We can deal with the chains when the belly is dealt with, and then whoever knows how to deal with the chains will deal with the chains. Exactly, Junebug. The reason why everyone just tries to go in the belly is because, on average, less than a third of the raid even knows how to do it. And if you're sitting here in the stream now going, well, I'm not sure how I do it, and this is going to be easier to understand when we're at the boss. There's going to be like purple goop on the floor. If you step in that, you will get snared, and then Cerberus will eat you. If Cerberus eats you, you die. Unless you're small. There's an orb, a purple orb somewhere in the arena that will burst out an AoE every so often. When it does, if you get hit, you become small. So the game plan, the huge brain, galaxy brain strategy, is get hit by purple orb, then step in purple goop, then go into belly, then question marks, and then profit. Uh-oh. We forgot about the slime. We might wipe. Ow! Oh boy, 10-second silence. How do you avoid this big slime, you might ask? At some point the boss drops down a puddle of poison. If you stand in it, which makes you take damage, sounds counterintuitive. If you stand in it, then you will absorb it and make these slimes spawn and be dealt with more easily. I believe it also just they will spawn and eventually combine together, I believe. I'm not entirely 100% sure on it, but typically it is resolved by standing in the poison. There's a lot of weird mechanics in the World of Darkness. But yeah. That is why the game plan for Cerberus is everyone that knows how go in belly. Gilano says, well, first of all, Junebug says, thank you. Wow, I can't believe I never noticed. That's why it suddenly just stops sometimes. It's really weird with the hourglass. And Gilano says, how would you feel about if they rework the Crystal Tower raid series like they are reworking AR dungeons? I think that would be a great idea, actually. The problem is that right now the Alliance raids are too easy to matter. Players don't learn the mechanics because you can usually get away with just brute forcing it. Just smash the boss harder, it'll be fine. So buffing the raid, or buffing the mobs in the raid so that you have to deal with the mechanics would be disastrous because no one would know how, like, where to even begin. And it would sneak up on everyone. It would be interesting, and ultimately players would eventually learn it, right? But the biggest problem is actually that there are some of the bosses in the Crystal Tower raid series that are so weak that you don't even see their mechanics. That big burly guy in the Labyrinth of the Ancients, I believe, that just punches you and then eventually he dies. he has a lot of mechanics. There are those platforms out around the arena and stuff like that. I don't know what the mechanics are. I have no idea, because I've never seen him do anything. I've never seen him do anything. So I think the best reason why they should rework the Crystal Tower series is because you can't buff it. That is not an option, because it will just not work. Many of the mechanics expect you to have a toolkit you don't have anymore. And those that don't, they need too much help, I think. But if they reworked the bosses, that would both be a breath of fresh air, and most of the bosses people didn't even know how they worked in the first place. So who would mind, right? And Flattening Contradiction says, I just follow my tank and heal for servers. I know how to get to the belly, but I have no idea for ads or chains. Yeah, and someone in chat said B takes ads, C do chains. That doesn't make any sense. Unless, of course, they are pre-made in the entire A alliance and they know that they'll get it right. I'm going to go into the belly to show you guys how it's done. And Junebug says, one day I hope to see the worms in this raid. I actually have seen the worms. I'm pretty sure I saw some worms in the final boss. And we saw them and immediately wiped. Immediately wiped. So, purple orb goes bloop. Now you're small. Purple goop. Small people get eaten, go into belly. That easy. And then you just, really, the reason why you want to have a tank in here, do we have any tanks? No. Don't think. Is because you need someone to just hold on and keep all the attention of all the ads while all the DPS kill the stomach wall. Because once you kill the stomach walls, all of the ads don't matter. Like, you can ignore them. And Flattening Contradiction says... Oh, wait. Oh boy! Those chains are far away! Rosati says, I got in just in case you need the healing. Yeah, I did see. I do appreciate that. In my experience, typically if there is a healer that is inside, they will try to heal any person that happen to go in with them, because the healers that tend to go in the belly know how to play really well. So they often look for these things. They went in the belly because they know if they don't, no one else will. Nope. Have a healer down. Flattening Contradiction says, I'm a crafter main. Anyway, I don't need mechanics. I do content to unlock more crafting materials. Fair enough. That's fair. But that is also an important thing, is that alliance raids are content that is made to be beaten. I've talked about this before. Casual content that you typically hear referred to as casual content, basically not current extremes, not current savage, not any ultimate, is content that is made to be beaten. Old extremes are technically not made to be beaten, it's just that they become easy enough that they become meant to be beaten. These kinds of encounters, casual content, are designed to be beatable in a single session. Which means that mechanics have to be simple enough that even if you don't quite understand the mechanics, you can still win. The scary part about the Crystal Tower series is that they have boss mechanics that you need to get right. And some players don't get them. So either you have to be able to brute force the boss so hard that you can skip the difficult mechanics, or you need to make the mechanic simpler so that you can do it anyway, or so that you can understand it at a glance. If you don't want a challenge, then alliance raids are typically easy enough. That's also why most players have no idea how the Crystal Tower raids function. I also say myself that I don't know how many of the bosses work. I just know bits and pieces. Just enough. Skip Saw or Disband. Oh man, isn't that the final extreme trial of Heavensward? Wait, no wait, the final of the Warring Triad, sorry, I can't remember if that's the final one, I'm pretty sure it's not. The final Warring Triad, what's his name? Zurvan, right? It's Zurvan. Where it turns out, I heard a story that the reason why people made Skip Soar or Disband was because it was a difficult mechanic. Kasari says, yes, that one. The reason why people wanted to skip Soar or Disband was because it was a complicated mechanic, and players simply concluded that it was easier to use the skip, which was an extremely hard DPS check. Imagine skipping a mechanic in a current, like, Savage encounter while progressing on it, right? That's the key thing. While you're still progging on it, you have to do so much damage that you can skip a specific mechanic. This was only doable if you brought an extra DPS in place of a tank, which meant, of course, that you were now unable to deal with anything that required a tank switch, for example, if I remember correctly. But if you had a group that knew how to deal with Saw and just did it, it was supposedly, and remember, I didn't play in Heavensward, but it was supposedly, allegedly easier to do the fight properly. You just had to learn Saw. Oh, I'm C. And Coco says, me DPS, me hit boss, Ooga Booga. Unga Bonga, big damage. Number big. We don't even have Limit Break 3 because we have 2 red mages. Fun fact, the speed at which your Limit Break charges is affected by how many unique jobs you have in your raid. And Gilano says, I think they should do it to the Bahamut raid as well and add them to the roulettes. And maybe keep the old ones as a legacy. I think that's a good idea. Make the Binding Cords of Bahamut, like remake them to be in a similar style to how the current existing raid tiers work. You know, from Alexander and onward, where it's 4 fights per tier. But the importance of how it used to work is too big and too important to just delete, in my opinion. So I do agree that they should keep those as legacy as well. Nimiao says, I'm glad you're talking about this because it's been forever since I did that one and I can't remember anything. I'm pretty sure that was when we were talking about World of Darkness, Cerberus and stuff. And Junebug says, I've heard even if you go in minimum item level sync, you'll still skip all the hard mechanics in Crystal Tower. That sounds right. Right, next one is normal raids. That is minimum level 60. Have you decided, Coco? This I think it must be really difficult. Like, one thing is designing a raid to introduce you to a fight. You know, make it thematically correct and make it a little bit challenging. And then make a savage raid where, you know, ultimately the test is, can you beat it? Is it beatable? And that's really it. That is difficult in one way. Difficult in a completely different way is alliance raids. Because those are designed to be kind of hard, but still doable in one sitting. Like, that is really impressive balancing. And then even so, you often hear savage raiders that say that the boss fights are too simple. Meanwhile, I'm just saying, the newest Alliance raid has some mean mechanics if you're not that good at the game. Really, it does. Because I says, at least World of Darkness has some mechanics to do. Indeed. I think that Alliance raids are significantly, like, it's a step up compared to, like, normal raids. Because they're not designed to be beatable just like that. They're more designed to be really hard, but they tend to only kill a third of your alliance raid at a time. So you can always recover. Like, they're just banking on the fact that there's a huge amount of players. So they can get away with killing off a bunch of players at once. I don't remember if these are important to kill, but I will kill it, just in case it matters. But wait, there's more! Oh dear. In retrospect, I should have helped over on the other one, probably. So that we can kill one off. Janelle says, I will kill it, just in case. Dreamy behavior, yeah, exactly. Could you imagine if Death's design gave more resources than just 10? So that it was like a significant DPS gain to kill something with... get to high ground. If you killed something off. That would be very interesting, because then you would have Reapers that would go out of their way to kill ads so that they could get the big payoff. Junebug says, I would love to see a Savage Alliance raid once per expansion. Especially now that they seem to be going away from both Eureka-style content. Yeah, that's true. And if I remember correctly, the Savage version of the Lupin Regine was 48 players, right? That was not just an Alliance raid, Savage Alliance raid, it was 2 Alliance raid size. It was double up. Oh, I sure hope there isn't like a trumpet player or sax player or something in the area. I'm actually not entirely clear on what instrument that is. And Baldessian is 56? Oh, this is going to hurt a lot. I've never finished Eureka, and I've never been in Baldessian Arsenal. I didn't really like Eureka that much, and I participated in Eureka when it was new. Like when there was only the first bit and the first 20 levels. I got to level 19, and then I believe I quit the game, and then I came back way later. Oh, tanked it. I choose you! Next tank! Coco, you can do it! Hang in there! The boss is almost dead! I'll limit break it, because we're not getting limit break 2 anyway. Okay, now we might actually get it if we're getting like a hugely massive intermission. Oh well. I'm a fire in Malaysia! Oh boy. High ground? Oh. I love the ridiculousness of this fight. Now, we run before someone decides to open the treasures. Yeah, I didn't really like Eureka that much, so I never got that far in it. I actually liked Boja more, but I still only really got into it when there were relic weapons on the line. To upgrade and such. Like, I unlocked the weapons, which required me to enter Boja, and then when the game was like, oh, you have to do more Boja to upgrade them, I did more Boja. But only when the game said you have to do more Boja. But I did like doing it. Like, I did like being there, but if you've ever heard the concept that gamers will, and especially MMO gamers, will only do something if there is a reward. That is surprisingly accurate. You probably wouldn't do an expert roulette every day if it didn't give anything. For example. This leaves the Euphrosyne, the weekly alliance raid, to do. And Coco says, maybe the reward is a friendship we made along the way. Generally, that is the answer for me when I do a lot of roulettes in a row, because I don't need all of them, usually. Kosari, do you want to come for Euphrosyne? Also, where did you go? You're hiding over there. Apparently there's no shortcut for that one. But, yeah, the thing that has really deterred me from bothering to do Baldessian Arsenal is that most of the stories I've heard about it is a friend that did a lot of Baldessian Arsenal, and they often complained that if you die, even right at the end, you could miss out on rewards. And because Baldessian Arsenal is timed in a way, it's not like your group can go out if you die off in the middle of it. It's just kind of, nope, sorry. While the Lubrum Brigine Savage, if too many people die, you can just go back in again. You can just go out and in again. Junebox is very true. That's the main reason I haven't suffered through Criterion Savage, even though I really want the title. No real reward at the end. Is there no reward? I thought there was something. I'm not sure. I haven't done it. It's funny. I remember when we heard about the Criterion dungeons. When we heard about the Criterion dungeons, I remember my free company, we were talking about going in there together because it was 4-man content. We would actually be able to like put forth a group that could go in and do it. Then we discovered how difficult it was. And never went. There's also the part that the majority of the free company didn't actually get around to properly doing variant dungeons until like over a month after most players had lost interest in the content entirely. Basildine Throne Mount. Oh yeah, that is a reward. And Quasari here is sitting on the reward from the Lubrum Regine Savage. And Junebox says, Criterion normal has the mount, but the Savage just has a banner. I think the mount can drop from the Savage chest, though. I think also there's, you can just straight up buy the mount if you do it enough times, or something like that. To me personally, a mount as a reward can be interesting, could be cool to have, but it's usually not enough to get me into it. Like, the reason why we do mount farms in the free company is mainly because it is content that is hard enough that it is interesting to do together as a free company, while still being easy enough that everyone can participate, right? But I don't really care about the mounts. You see me pick up all those mounts, and then you see me stream, and then the only mount that I'm using is Rubelite Cavuncle anyway, right? Doesn't matter to me.
Prove to me life's resolve.
But if you need an incentive to do content, then a mount isn't the worst one, certainly. That is the circle area, I believe. Perfect. That is the donut AoE. I just want you to look at this for a little bit, because remember, when this raid came out, I just consider this. I saw people complain that the alliance raids were too easy. Remember, this boss is using attacks where there's only a single visual indicator for what the mechanic is going to do. You know, no actual telegraph for some of her attacks. You know, how Savage raids tend to be. Compare this to how an Alliance raid was in Heaven's Ward or Stormblood, for example. We can probably agree that the content is harder now. It's just that the Savage encounters are so much harder by comparison that it's not even funny. Uh-oh, I read that wrong. I thought it pointed the other way. You saw me even turn my character to accommodate it. Oh. I didn't need to do that.
Mine is the breath of the earth.
And then do the Dublin Shroud. Are you? Hopefully I don't have to move right where they overlap. Oh, it's fine. Abundance, that's the raid wide. And this is also something that I've talked about previously, is that the reason why even the casual content is as hard as it is in Final Fantasy XIV is because as the majority of the player base has had to make their way gradually through all of the main quests, like they have been forced to do so much content that most players have, you know, gradually become better at the game as they played it. So an Endwalker encounter is going to be enormous, an enormous difference compared to an Endwalker. Well, an Endwalker encounter is going to have an enormous difference compared to a Realm Reborn encounter, for example. Because they can get away with that. I would say, in comparison to, say, World of Warcraft, in my opinion, normal dungeons tend to be very simple. Because you can't be sure what the skill level is of the average player, because you don't actually have to do difficult content to reach the end game, right? Coco says, I get worse the more I play a game. I think that's just because as you play the game more, you slack on the fundamentals.
Good children, be strong for what awaits.
Jao says, nothing will ever beat Cape Westwind though. That's true. Actually, Cape Westwind, I've heard, is surprisingly difficult when you do it at minimum item level. Or it was. It was. I have one time gone into Cape Westwind in the old version, of course, where I believe all 7 players, aside from myself, were sprouts wearing their clan, you know, their job gear that they were given. So their item level was very low. They were also not, you know, playing optimally. That's besides the point. But that didn't help. We almost wiped because we not only had to deal with an overflow of ads, but there was this mechanic that you would have seen the boss cast, where he shoots something into the air and then it just never turns into anything because the fight is over by then. But if you let it happen, there will be a absolutely gigantic circle AoE. You cannot run out of it in time. You had to have run out beforehand or you will get hit. Which I thought was hilarious. If I remember correctly, the only reason we didn't wipe was because I had such an overwhelming item level as a healer that I somehow survived it. By sheer force of will. And besides says, this is my fastest kill. Excellent. I don't really keep track of how quickly I kill the fights. I just recognize that usually alliance raids take like 30 minutes. And then if it takes a lot longer, I usually notice. Junebug says, I ran it minimum item level, no job stones, before they removed it. Those random tank busters and the random meteors are scary. You ran it without... You ran it as classes? That's ridiculous. I respect that. That is cool. That is an interesting way to add challenge to a simple encounter. That is something. This is actually something that I'm almost certain maybe a few of you might have seen it, or maybe even none of you have seen it. I put up a video a while back about
Forgive me, but I couldn't stay away.
It seems
what was it?
shall be joining us. Tis only fitting we face you together.
Making games more approachable. Like adding customization options to the difficulty and things like that, so you can play it your own way. And one of the things that you will notice in games that are easy, like, I don't know, a Pokemon game, for example, is that players will just come up with challenges to make the game difficult in their own way. You don't need to make the game difficult. If it isn't difficult, then people will find a way to make it harder if they like the game enough. Oh right, I believe it was called accessibility in games is a good thing. If you want to see it. And I say I'm pretty confident most of you haven't seen it, because it is one of the videos I have on the channel that has gotten the least views. Surprise, like, based on when it was released. Yeah, exactly, Coco, the accessibility one. You watched it recently? Oh, okay. I want to say it's not that I'm being like salty that people didn't watch it. It was more just a fact that there's a good chance that you guys watching this stream haven't watched it. First of all, because it isn't about Final Fantasy XIV, but also because not a lot of people watched it. Like, just cold hard fact, not a lot of people watched it, so very low chance you guys watched it. Oh yeah, and if any of you are a little bit uncertain on the mechanics of this boss fight, you might be watching the fight and going, why is Althik healing all the time? Basically, this fight, Nemea, and there you saw him heal right there, Nemea and Althik share health every now and then. Like, they will just even out their health pools. So technically, if you're a ranged job and you can apply dots or something, you would be able to do more damage by putting dots on Nemea while you're at it.
Long have I awaited this moment.
And Ayla says, how long have you been playing? You're talking and playing at the same time? Yes, that is correct. How long I've been playing tonight? Or you mean in general? This stream has been going on for about 2 hours. 2.5 hours. But if you're talking about how long I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV in general, I've played it for on and off since Stormblood. Is that 4 or 5 or 6 years ago? And Coco says, people get mad over accessibility, it's crazy. It's because... I think it's because people view it as being able to reduce the difficulty of the game reduces the value of their accomplishment. If that makes sense. I remember there was a lot about that when people said that they wanted a version of Sekiro that was easier because the game was too hard or something like that. And then a lot of players said that no, this game is supposed to be hard. Either you are good enough to be able to beat it and so you deserve to beat it, or you're not good enough and then you don't deserve to beat it. On one hand, that's a fair argument. Not all games have to be easy. On the other hand, what exactly is the difference? If there was an easy version, because if there isn't an easy version, someone will just find a way to make an easy version, like someone will mod it or something. Yeah, because I says on Sekiro it has to do with vision. That is true. If the developer believes that it is the correct way of experiencing the game is to experience it on its hardest setting and nothing else will suffice. That's fair. Besides, one of the reasons I'm pretty sure people wanted an easier version was because either A, they didn't like being forced to learn how to parry, and the main core mechanic of the game was this whole parrying shenanigans. So if you could make the game easy enough that you didn't have to worry about parrying, then there isn't really a game. Then it just becomes run up to enemy and just smack them with your sword until they die. I could see that, right? But that is also whether you have seen it or not. The key point of my video about accessibility is that you don't need to make an easy difficulty. You don't have to make an easy difficulty you can choose. You can just make it so that there are accessibility options. You know how in Celeste you can go in and toggle some settings to make the game easier, and the game literally tells you that you can do that if you want to, but it's not supposed to be played like that. Like, as Raven says, well, actually not as Raven says. I, as a player of this game, I'm allowed to choose whether other people get to play this game or not. As I believe, as Celeste says, is if that it's your experience. You choose whether you want to make it different. You can, if you want to, make it different. And ultimately, if a game doesn't come with an easy difficulty out the box, then it will have an easy difficulty the moment that modding becomes an option. And usually that easy version will typically be too easy. And this is also something I talked about in that accessibility video. Oops. Oh dear. What I talked about in that is that if if you are given the option to customize completely freely what your difficulty in the game is, then in most situations, I'm stuck with Alliance B, it seems. Then most of the time you will choose full invulnerability over, say, you take less damage or the enemies hit slower. Why would you choose less than that, right? It's also when you put on the cheats and the mods that make the game easier, the game tends to, well, why not put on other cheats, right? You already turned on the invulnerability. Might as well also add infinite money. You could also just multiply the XP gain by 20, right? It's more fun that way. So it's just, as Quasadi says, on Sekiro it has to do with vision. But if there was an easier difficulty in the game, like an accessibility option, as I was saying, then people wouldn't feel like they had to try and cheat the system to be able to play the game. And so they would at least get a closer experience to what the developer intended. Coco says, for me it's easy, I just don't play hard games. That's also an option, that is certainly also an option. This fight is taking surprisingly long, I feel like. I'm guessing it's because we had a bunch of deaths. Raven says, and at the end of the day, does the developer's intent really matter against the player's experience with the game? Deeper art question, I suppose, but it's an interesting subject. That is correct. And that is actually a very good point. In most of the games that I've seen go into great lengths with customizing difficulty, that's because while their vision is one thing, they actually care more about as many people getting to experience their art as possible, rather than being the vision being exactly what they had in mind, if that makes sense. For example, Fellseal is like a similar game to Final Fantasy Tactics. The first time you open the game and try to, make a new save, the game asks you for every single customizable option in the game. What would you like it to be? They offer you some difficulty settings, but technically, they go, you figure it out. They ask you, do you want there to be permadeath? Do you want that? Do you want there to even be any punishment at all for dying? Your choice. It's your save. We don't care. Do you like the game? That's what we care about. And that's just one example. Oh yeah, by the way, arena symbolism. Remember that shot recently? The lines on the floor indicate exactly where the line AoE here happens. Isn't that amazing? I'm not. I'm pretty sure that those cleave. Yeah, those are beams.
Prepare yourself.
Dune boxes. I love that so many mechanics in Final Fantasy boil down to look at the lines in the ground. I think it's incredibly well, like incredibly good design. Like a proof of how well the encounter designers communicate with the rest of the team when making an encounter, because the people responsible for, you know, actually coding the encounter has to code it like that. Those responsible for making the arena has to draw it like that. Like it's a complete experience where all of them have done each their part. So I think that is incredible. Uh-oh. Junebox says, definitely agree. It really shows how well everything has been designed. I think a thing that adds even further to this is that one of the biggest downfalls of Final Fantasy 1.0 was that the game felt like it was made with no communication between the departments. Like every single team just did their own thing and they did make the coolest thing they could possibly make, but they made it without discussing it with anyone else. So it felt like it was a lot of pretty things put in a world that didn't match together, is what I have been told, what I've read, what I've seen in like interviews and stuff. So knowing that, and then seeing this, like this kind of teamwork that they do today, where where boss arenas are designed with clear markers to indicate boss mechanics that someone else coded and someone else wanted. Like the complete combination really shows that how much better the team has gotten at teamwork. Ram says, I just capped Black Mage. Well, I don't think it's a job for me. I can see why some people love it. That is a pretty good take, I think. That is pretty good. Ow. Oh boy. One more. Wow. The greed was real. Wow, that was close. And hey, Woolly Ram. Hope you're doing well. Explosions! I think that Black Mage is the kind of job where it is extremely satisfying when you get it right. The scary thing is that while you can, a lot of players, I'm sure, can get it perfectly right on a striking dummy, the scary part is when you introduce boss mechanics. Or anything at all that could mess with your rotation, really. That's also why, as I mentioned earlier with Monk, that I think it is reassuring to know that that Monk has, like, they don't gain that much DPS from doing the rotation completely perfectly. Because one of the hardest things is doing it right, while also dealing with boss mechanics. June boxes. Black Mage is too scary for me. Got it to 90 and don't think I'll touch it again until 7.0. I think the most fun part about Black Mage is just messing around with it on a striking dummy. That might also be the reason why there are so many hyper detailed guides and information on the job for small optimizations. Because a lot of players think it's fun to just mess around at a striking dummy with the job, is my guess. And Woody Ram says true, but in content you're familiar with, it just feels amazing. And it's always funny to stand in your ley lines between 3 AoE markers. True. Absolutely true. When the job works, it just works. But I can understand that some players wouldn't find it fun. These 5 pixels are mine. Makes me think of when we did Hades, Hades Extreme on mount farming streams, and we have that single pixel spot in the C marker where you can stand for a mechanic. That's where the ley lines go. But it is a difficult job to play. I think I got all of the roulettes that I planned to do and all of the weekly stuff I planned to do done. Yeah, so you may be saying, well, you didn't do frontline. Well, last week we did frontline, but since last week I have had some private time to grind the last bit of the series level, so I don't need to do any more PvP for this series. And if anyone wants to see what the outfit you get for that looks like, I have it somewhere here. There it is. It's in pink though. Basadi says, in P8S, for example, the arena design is a savior. Like, there are white and black lines which mark some of the untelegraphed AoEs perfectly. Well, there you go. Like, recently I released a short on floor mechanics, where I highlight E5. That one has a very particular pattern on the floor that it's significant in normal, but on Savage it's like if you didn't have markers to like memorize it, and even with markers, the floor pattern is what you use to meter out those positions for the markers in the first place. It might be nearly impossible to plan out properly. And Will Ram says, I want to cap or at least level 80 monk and dragoon to clear up my armory. That is a good point. I recommend, if you want to level up jobs but you're not in a rush to do it, just do leveling roulette with the job you want to level every day. I'm pretty sure that is the most time efficient of all the roulettes. Like, if you only have time to do one thing, then I would recommend that one. Isn't E11S, that's Nightmare Thancred, isn't it? And Woolly Ram says right now, even in the evening, all roulettes are sub 5 minutes, even for DPS. That is a good point. And now you say right now, you might be wondering why that happens. So, some of you may have heard recently that there's been a lot of complaints that the Relic grind is just another 1,500 astronomy per weapon, which is kind of boring. When you think about in previous expansions, it was something specific that you had to grind. The fact that you need an astronomical amount of astronomy tomestones to max out all of the relic weapons result in a lot of players that want all of them, like me, just doing a lot more roulettes. And most of the time these kinds of players will run as tank or healer, because usually those have shorter queue times. They will just take the L on that one and play the job with a faster queue time. Which results in a lot of roulettes just needing DPS players. It increases the queue time for tanks and healers, and sometimes DPS have instant queues because of it. I think it's a good thing. Especially because these kinds of relic grinds tend to be what tides you over until there's new content. Adding stuff that gives you something to do, just something, and makes things a bit easier, might make people feel more inclined to, grind an extra job when they know that the queue times are shorter. Things like that. And Woolly Ram says, Stage 2 relics are meh. Stage 1 looks sharp. Aren't the relic Stage 2s just the same as Stage 1, just with flashy colors on them? I'm pretty sure they are. I understand if you don't like flashy colors on your weapons, then upgrading them doesn't seem that enticing aside from the stats. But I mainly want them because I like to collect them, and I can. I don't have any of the relics from A Realm Reborn to Stormblood maxed out, but I have all of the Shadowbringers ones. Woolly Ram says the flashy colors don't mesh, they look unappealing to you. That's fair enough. I think they look pretty cool. Some people like them, some people don't. My common complaint with the flashy colors on relic weapons is that I want them to change color when I dye it. Raven says, it's only because this is the first couple of steps. They're always easy, the next ones will be harder. That's true, but even in Shadowbringers, if I remember correctly, the second step included a one-time quest where you had to do a huge amount of fates or something like that. If I remember correctly, the second step required you to do a bunch of fates in Heavensward zones and in Stormblood zones. Which isn't really, content, quote-unquote content, per se. But it turned out to become content. You may have heard players complain that there's no Blue Mage content. There is no Blue Mage content at this point in an expansion. That is normal. There wasn't any in Shadowbringers either. The reason why people think there was is because in this patch, like around this time in Shadowbringers, there was a relic weapon quest line part that happened to be extremely convenient to do with Blue Mage, which meant that by proxy there was actually Blue Mage content. Like, there was actually Blue Mage content because you could do these fates with Blue Mage, and it was easier. So people remember it as if there was Blue Mage content, even though there wasn't. But the key thing to remember is that if there had been a more elaborate quest line, the Blue Mage update was in 5.15. Which update was that? We can figure out that quickly. New Blue Mage spells have been added. The Blue Mage log has been added. Oh yeah, the 5.15 is when they expanded it to level 60, right? That's true. Blue Mage was added in the pre-patch to Shadowbringers, but only up to level 50. And then in 5.15, as Giuliano says, they expanded it to level 60. And then, like super late in Shadowbringers, they expanded it to level 70. But when the cap was 60, in patch, I believe it was 5.35. Let me just check. And hey, Erika, how are you doing? Let me just check. There was an expansion to the Relic weapons. And I'm pretty sure that was the one that required you to farm fates. I'm pretty sure. So yes, it's true that the Blue Mage got something in 5.15, but then they also indirectly got something in 5.35. And there was also the part in the Relic quest of Shadowbringers where you had to farm Crystal Tower raids. Was an option. It was one of the ways you could do it. The fastest way to do that was to have a full party of almost just Blue Mages. Like, I think it was the most effective was you had one real tank and maybe one real healer. And then you had one ranged physical in each alliance group, so that you had per peloton. And then you just had Blue Mages for the rest of it. So you had something along the lines of 18 or 19 Blue Mages. But you had a real tank because it was easier, and you had a real healer because it was easier. And Erika says, I'm good, wanted to stop by and say thank you for all the wonderful class guides. You probably hear it all the time, but it was still incredibly helpful. So thank you for helping me learn Black Mage and Red Mage. Thank you so much. And I want to just highlight that you cannot say a good thing too many times. The people that leave mean comments on my videos do not care whether I've heard it 10 other times. So I would rather hear that you found my guides helpful 100 times a day than not hear it. So don't even worry about it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So remember that everyone listening, if you want to leave a nice comment on a video, go for it. The reason why a lot of content creators don't read comments is because they have been overwhelmed by mean comments and given up bothering to read because it's not worth the pain to find the nice comments. So please, remember to leave a nice comment for your for your fragile content creators. Some of them are fragile. I can take it. At least for now. Thank you so much, Erika. And Willy Ram says, I do remember running into a lot of black mages doing fates and late Shadowbringers. That's funny. I wonder why they would be black mages. So did you mean blue mages? Coco says, I'm going to leave a stinky comment. Well, as long as the sentiment is friendly, I don't mind. Yeah, really. I don't mind getting getting a friendly compliment on my guides. I don't think I will ever hear it too many times. As Erica says, you probably hear it all the time. I actually don't, by the way. Sometimes there can go days or even over a week where there's maybe one comment that just says, I prefer it this way, or something like that. So, Woody Ram says, what do you think so far about Reaper? Have you played it in Savage? I have not played Reaper and Savage. To be perfectly clear, I have in the current raid tier, I have only played Summoner. And I've done all of the Savage raiding I have done on stream. So you can see that if you would like. It was from the very beginning of the raid tier, so that's months ago. The reason why I don't do Savage is because I prefer to focus on other things. It gives me time to focus on optimizing the jobs. As I said before, there's a chance the reason why black mages and monks have so detailed guides is because some players just like to mess around and experiment with the jobs more so than doing raids. I don't know if that's true, but it's a guess. I like to mess around with the jobs like that more and figure out things more general in the game, so I don't do Savage that much. I also prefer to do hard content with friends, and given that my friend group in-game aren't good enough to go for the current Savage raid tier, and that is not to be mean, that's just how it be. Most of my free company aren't prepared to do Savage. They just aren't. But that's okay. That's the best part about there being so much you can do in Final Fantasy XIV. And Sean Gibbs says, I love Reaper so much. Great. That's awesome. And Gilano says, there was a time during Shadowbringers where people ran a train of blue mages in AR fates to grind the yokai event. True. And then there was also the Heavensward and the Stormblood fates. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get at here is not that I'm saying I don't want to claim that there wasn't any blue mage content, as Gilano has disproven that fact. I claimed that before. That was false. There was a blue mage update in 5.15. Granted, fair enough. But everything from 5.15 until when they got the expansion to level 70 was actually content that was for players in general that turned out that blue mages were really good at doing. So blue mages did it. And then people remember it as blue mage content. Woolly Ram says, so that's why Monk has so many cursed openers. Maybe. It's a possibility. As I said earlier, I think the reason why jobs get complicated openers or weird janky openers for optimization is a combination of reasons. For example, Summoner has 2 openers to optimize raid buffs. Like, to optimize to get the most damage out of the raid buffs there are. Why? Because the Summoner's damage output is so fixed that the only thing they really can do to do slightly more damage is to maximize this little detail. Something like Samurai will just do the best they can do and call it a day. They don't need to get creative because there's one opener that is really good, as far as I know. And Monk has 5 openers. And the reason for that is because Potato Bot says, is Monk really that hard? Yes and no. The reason why the monk has 5 openers is because the classic lunar solar, that is, so just to be clear, I'm not going to do this perfectly, I'm just going to demonstrate that if you open, so you go, you do stuff, and then you do I believe the lunar is 3 identicals, right? So you get elixir field, you get lunar, and then you do stuff, and then you do a solar. Remember, this is not an actual opener, I'm just demonstrating here. Then you do Rising Phoenix, that is the solar. The reason why this is important is because when you do a lunar solar, you're maximizing the DPS you can do over the course of a fight, you personally. But technically, the third perfect balance, which is going to come out on the even minute, or no, the odd minute, where you just get rid of fire, no raid buffs, is going to be equal to a lunar in composition, typically. But it does like 50% to 100% more damage with the finisher. So the reason why you would do a solar, lunar, or something like that opener is because the lunar sequence does slightly more damage. The solar sequence does slightly less, but applies all of your buff, applies debuffs, and sets up Dragon Kick and everything, but does slightly less damage. So if you do solar, then that means that on the odd minute you will do a lunar, but then every even minute for the rest of the fight, Phantom Rush, you know, your heaviest hitting attack, will land in raid buffs. You're sacrificing potentially 1 Phantom Rush like 7 minutes into the fight to get all of your Phantom Rushes in the raid cooldowns. It sounds ridiculous, but this is the kind of optimization that people are thinking about when they say there are 5 openers. And the reason why the 5 openers are there is because which one is best depends on how many perfect balances you get. And you want to make the most of them. So to PotatoBot's question, is Monk really that hard? If you want to maximize the damage your Monk can do, like to completely maximize how much damage it can do, yes. Absolutely. Monk is possibly the hardest job in the game. But then also no. If you've ever heard about the Dragon Kick rotation, which, no, I'm going to stop you there. It is not viable. Well, it is technically viable, but it is a huge damage loss over performing your rotation correctly. It is more like a proof of concept. You can forego the majority of the filler rotation from Monk and just do spam Dragon Kick, and you will do like 93%. 93% of the damage that you would do while doing the correct rotation. What this is supposed to prove has actually nothing to do with Dragon Kick, and has everything to do with the fact that jobs that go really fast, or jobs that go faster, are less punishing. They make it so that Monk, if you press the wrong button, which you are almost guaranteed to do because of the pace of the job if you're not used to it, they make it so that pressing the wrong button doesn't hurt as much. If that makes sense. Like, if you look at Monk in a vacuum, it's hard to see, but if you compare to, say, Dragoon, you have a lot more time to think between your actions, also because you just have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then think, okay, now I have to do the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just alternate them. If you mess up and do the wrong sequence, it will cost you dearly. Like, it's very expensive on your damage to either do the rotation like that anyway. Like, if you accidentally do 2 Heaven's Thrust sequences in a row, Power Surge is going to drop. Chaotic Spring's Dot is going to drop. You're going to lose a lot of damage. just because you accidentally pressed Warble Thrust at the wrong time. Monk, on the other hand, while yes, if you press True Strike when you were supposed to use Twin Snakes, it means that Twin Snake is going to drop off around when you use Demolish or Snap Punch, because it lasts 15 seconds. That means that you messing up and not using Twin Snakes cost you 2 GCDs of losing 15% damage. Only 2. While Dragoon might lose like 3, and those 3 hit harder because it's Dragoon. Relatively speaking, you might also run into the situation that you have to use Jump, but Power Surge isn't up. You might have to use Geistgurgul, but Power Surge isn't up. So you run into a lot more problems because you made one fatal mistake, while Monk is like, the only time you can really mess yourself up is when you click Perfect Balance. When you click Perfect Balance, you don't want this. That's the only thing that you don't want. So if you want, so the only thing you have to really worry about as a monk, aside from, you know, try and do your best to get your next GCD correctly as you go through the sequence, is when you click Perfect Balance, go, which 3 GCDs am I going to use now? And know that before you start. So you know before you click Perfect Balance, I'm going to make a Lunar finisher. Or I'm going to make a Solar finisher. If you know that, perfect. I'm not sure how big of a DPS difference it's going to make, but I believe Santu spelled it out pretty well earlier. I think it was Santu. He said, if you can fit your burst in your cooldowns, perfect. And if you're still practicing Savage, then there's a high chance that the raid cooldowns are going to drift anyway. So your cooldowns drifting a bit doesn't matter. It's fine. The important part is that you make the most of your cooldowns when they're up. Your own cooldown is the biggest one after all. So, in other words, playing Monk, like getting into Monk, I would say has a really high skill floor compared to some other jobs. But playing on like the average performance of a monk isn't that much higher. It's like once you've reached the skill floor, you're already doing really well. And then the problem is that to get those last few % of damage that you can do is like just a vertical cliff. Or like a vertical straight line upwards. Because it's so much harder to get those last few %. Which is why it gets this weird situation where you can see that it doesn't matter that much what you do, because your rotation, like most of your actions, do the same damage anyway. But it's because when you sit down and watch, if you read a guide or watch a guide, doesn't matter. You look at a guide. This person is going to try to teach you either how to play the basic level of the job, an average level of the job, or how to play it perfectly. So if I say, let me show you the optimized opener for the monk, and you look at that and go, I can't do that. Neither can I, sometimes. That's okay. But you knowing what the optimal opener is going to help you to make your way there. Eventually you will be able to like just absent-mindedly perform the perfect opener for your main. You will learn that eventually. Or you might even manage to freestyle it to a point where you can, you know, do the optimal opener in the given moment. Based on what you know. So that is also fine. Coco says, wait, you guys have a main? Sure. And Kosadi says, not gonna lie, FPS has an effect on input lag, but that sounds like some deep optimization. That one I actually have an answer for. I read about the FPS optimization for monks. I read about it. The thing is that in the monk, in like monk discourse, what is being talked about is to maximize your damage, you need to do X. So they talk about how, like, what your GCD needs to be if you have a certain, like, if you're playing on 60 FPS, for example. But they don't really talk about how much damage that is. Someone on one of my videos, I believe it was on my melee comparison video, because I made a joke out of that fact. Take note that my role comparisons are not intended to be job guides. They talk about the jobs and how they play in some capacity, but you're supposed to watch a proper guide for the job afterwards, if anything. So I try to make jokes to try and clarify that I'm trying to be entertaining rather than teaching. This one person specifically pointed out that the damage difference between having the correct or incorrect GCD while playing on 60 FPS amounted to something like 0.01% DPS over the course of a fight. So that means if you do 10,000 DPS, which is possible, that is absolutely possible. That is very possible on a Stone Sky C dummy for most melee DPS jobs. It is possible to do. Then having the correct FPS gives you +1 DPS. That's it. But technically it's more than not doing it. So it is correct that it is better to do it than not do it, right? And Woolly Ram says, since you mentioned Samurai, a second of silence for Kaiten. F. I'm lucky that I actually saved a from my original Samurai guide from back in Shadowbringers. I actually have a clip of using Kaiten. I think I should have that. It should be somewhere. I can't find it right now. Doesn't matter. It is in my Shadowbringers Samurai Primer if you want to see it. It happens near the end. Because the guide was so short that I decided to cover level 52 as well. Kasadi says, I understand this. It is extremely important to complete Dragoon cooldown cycles, or GCD cycles, along with longer GCD times. You pretty much have to alternate between Heaven's Frost and Chaotic Spring. The dot will drop for only a split of a second if you do GCD cycle correctly. Exactly. Goku says, before I get Monk, I'm gonna need a computer upgrade. And Woolly Ram says, does exploiting Gunbreaker for faster queues count as having a main? I don't know. Which job do you play the most? You could argue that that is your main. You don't necessarily have to have a main. My most geared job right now is Warrior. So I like to say that Warrior is my main. When I do my daily roulettes alone, I typically do it as Warrior if I'm not recording anything. Because I find that easier. And I like that. But sometimes I'll play a different job. But you don't have to have a main. Well, I think the poll is not too surprising. I suppose the options that I gave were 3 very broad or very specific choices, and then one that was sort of neutral. And I think that is the one that won out the most, with 17% saying it's my main, and 59% saying I like the job, and then 15% saying it's sort of meh, and 9% saying I will probably never play it. Now, the reason why someone might never play it could both be because they don't like to play melee DPS. It could also be they don't play DPS. It could also be they don't like Reaper. So, who knows? That is the advantage of having the option to answer somewhat anonymously in a poll like this. But I think this is not surprising for a Reaper stream. If you hated the job, why would you want to watch someone play the job for 3 hours? Now, this is around the time where I would certainly end the stream. So, if there's anything you guys would like to talk about before we end the stream, could be anything really. This is a great time to do so. Willie Ram says, I capped Reaper after doing the MSQ. From what I recall, it has a good rhythm. I like the way that Reaper plays. When I leveled up jobs at first, I leveled up Summoner and Scholar through the MSQ, and then I planned to level Sage and Reaper. But I actually planned to level Reaper first and ultimately level Sage first because I enjoyed it more. So, oh, well, I play both a lot. There's that. But with that said, over the next few days, I'm going to be releasing a remake of my Reaper starter guide and a remake of a high-level guide. And if you've ever seen my guides and thought, well, I don't need a guide that goes from level 71 to 90 because my Reaper's level 90, simply put, my guides include an end section that is several minutes long, where I go over all of the level 90 stuff specifically. So if you don't need the level by level summaries, you can just jump to the level 90 part. Usually my guides have, either they have timestamps in the video itself, so you can just find the part where it says like final summary or level 90 opener or something like that and go to that and skip everything else if you want. And then you get all of the level 90 stuff only. And if there's not in the time itself, or like in the video itself, you can just go into the description. Then I have messed up the timestamp so it doesn't look right on the video, and sometimes I don't see this. There was like a good few hours that the Gold Saucer guide I released Friday didn't have the timestamps properly. But they will always be in the descriptions, you can find them there. So I do recommend, if you want my take on level 90 for any job, then certainly my more recent guides have a very detailed level 90 section. It's not as detailed as explaining to you exactly the amount of skill speed you need depending on your FPS. But it is detailed enough that I'm pretty sure that if you are not a master of the job, you will definitely find something you might learn. Will Ram says, what did you think of the Reaper story? I think it was interesting. It was okay. They used, I'm pretty sure they used some of the knowledge they accumulated from their Hildebrand practice with some of the facial expressions that happened in it. Coco, do you want a low-level striking dummy? Would that help? Where E is? They're in your hood. But yeah, over the next few days, I'm going to be releasing a low-level and a high-level, or well, a starter and a high-level Reaper guide. And on Friday, we're going to be taking a look at the history of the monk. So if any of you guys have been very interested in how the monk plays, given how much we've been talking about monk tonight for some reason, I have worked through the Wayback Machine and compiled together a little history lesson, starting all the way from A Realm Reborn to Endwalker, a bit like the Bard video I released recently, where we talk about all about the history of the monk. I think you'll find that fun. It's a little long. But it is a premiere, so if you want to watch it with me, that is when it usually happens. Every week. And with that said, the only thing I have left to add beyond this is if you find it a little difficult to keep up with all the things that happen on this YouTube channel, I recommend that you join the community Discord. Because there is a room specifically dedicated to the weekly schedule, which is updated every Sunday or Monday, so you will know in advance, up to a week in advance, what happens depending on which day of the week. And there's also a room dedicated to announcements, so you can see whenever I post a video or plan a stream or anything, and you can even choose to get a notification whenever I post something if you like. There's also rooms to discuss all sorts of stuff with all the wonderful friendly people of the live streams and the Discord. So I'm sure you would find that fun. There's even a room to discuss spoilers if you want. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you, Gilano and Woolly Ram. Good night, or good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you all so much for watching, and I see you all really soon. Thank you, Junebug. Thank you all for watching. You want to wave goodbye, Coco? Good night. See you all very soon.